In the quiet cul-de-sac of Maple Drive, Karen had always prided herself on her meticulously manicured lawn and well-kept flower beds. But lately, her peaceful neighborhood was disrupted by the gentle tinkling of her neighbor's bamboo wind chimes. For Karen, this sound became more than just a nuisance, it transformed into an irrational obsession. She declared to anyone who would listen that these chimes were inviting dark energy, and were culturally insensitive, as if they somehow tarnished the essence of their community. Karen's fervent complaints reached the ears of the Homeowners Association, HOA, which took the matter seriously. A meeting was called, where she voiced her concerns passionately, waving her arms around for emphasis. Many neighbors listened with raised eyebrows, unsure if they should take her seriously or laugh it off. But, unexpectedly, the HOA decided to side with Karen, instructing her neighbor to remove the offending chimes. After hearing this news, many neighbors felt an uneasy tension rising. Instead of siding with Karen, they plotted a little rebellion in secret. One by one, they decided to install their own wind chimes, only these would be loud and bold. Metal chimes, conch shells, and even playful cowbells adorned each porch as they turned the serene night into a raucous symphony. The cul-de-sac began to buzz with excitement over their new noisy decorations, leaving Karen feeling increasingly isolated in her discontent. Little did she know that a storm was brewing that night, both in the skies and in her own backyard. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over Maple Drive, the HOA convened for an emergency meeting. The atmosphere buzzed with curiosity and uncertainty as residents filed into their seats, eager to hear Karen's grievances. With a dramatic flourish, she recounted how the gentle sounds of her neighbor's bamboo wind chimes had invaded her peaceful sanctuary. Her words flowed like water from a fountain, filled with passion but tinged with paranoia. She insisted they were an affront to community values. The HOA board members exchanged glances, some skeptical while others nodded in agreement. After listening to Karen's fervent speech, they debated the merits of her complaints. A few members expressed concern about freedom of expression and cultural appreciation, yet the weight of Karen's emotional appeal seemed to sway them. They ultimately decided to take action, believing it would restore harmony in the cul-de-sac. In a surprising turn of events, the HOA announced that the bamboo wind chimes must be removed. As murmurs spread through the room, some neighbors looked shocked while others felt relief. It was a decision that would send ripples throughout Maple Drive, ripples that Karen had not anticipated. With the directive issued, Karen felt a rush of victory wash over her. However, she was blissfully unaware of the brewing rebellion among her neighbors. Instead of siding with her newfound authority, they began to band together in secret. In their quest for revenge against what they saw as an unfair ruling, they plotted to drown out Karen's victory with their own joyful noise, a noise that would soon become a cacophony of clanging chimes echoing through the night. As news of the HOA's decision spread, whispers of rebellion filled the cul-de-sac. The neighbors gathered in small groups, exchanging knowing glances and hushed laughter. Many were tired of Karen's overreactions and felt that they needed to reclaim their neighborhood spirit. They decided to make a bold statement by installing their own wind chimes, but these would be anything but subtle. One by one, neighbors rushed to local shops, seeking out the loudest materials they could find. Metal chimes, with their sharp clanging, became a favorite choice among many. Others opted for colorful conch shells that produced a resonant sound whenever the wind blew. A few even brought home whimsical cowbells that jingled with every slightest gust, promising to add an extra layer of fun to their protest. As they hung their new decorations from porches and trees, the air around Maple Drive filled with a cacophony of noise. The once soft melodies of bamboo chimes were replaced by a raucous symphony that echoed off the houses and spilled into the streets. Laughter mixed with clanging sounds as neighbors rang their cowbells like jubilant celebration, taking delight in their newfound camaraderie against what they viewed as an unreasonable complaint. Excitement bubbled in the air as each neighbor tested the sounds of their chimes. Some even paired up to create makeshift performances, an impromptu competition for who could make the loudest noise. In this chaotic chorus, Karen's complaints seemed more distant than ever, drowned out by the spirited rebellion of her fellow residents, who were determined to have their joyful fun despite her discontent. Little did they know that Mother Nature was about to join in on this noisy affair. As the sun began its descent, the skies overhead changed from bright blue to a foreboding shade of gray. The neighbors of Maple Drive were too engrossed in their celebration to notice the shift in weather. Their laughter and chatter filled the air as they rang their newly hung wind chimes with delight, each jingle and clang echoing their triumph over Karen's complaints. Children dashed between houses, while adults tested their chimes, pushing boundaries with who could create the loudest and most creative noise. Little did they know, dark clouds were rolling in on the horizon, swirling ominously. The wind picked up slightly, causing the chimes to rattle against one another, creating a tranquil yet eerie prelude to the storm. Leaves rustled in the trees, and a distant rumble of thunder hinted at the chaos that was about to unfold. As neighbors continued to celebrate, unaware of the brewing tempest, lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating their joyful faces for just a brief moment. Some looked up, frowning at the ominous clouds gathering above, but they brushed it off, insisting that a little rain wouldn't dampen their spirits. They were determined to enjoy their victory over Karen's complaints, convinced that they had not only defended their right to express themselves but had also created a community bond through sound. Yet as darkness enveloped Maple Drive, the first drops of rain began to fall, quickly turning into a downpour. The wind howled, causing their noisy chimes to clash wildly in a cacophony of sound that was now marred by Mother Nature's furious arrival. Unbeknownst to them, this storm would bring more than just rain. It would usher in an unexpected shake-up for the residents and test their newfound unity in ways they couldn't foresee. The windstorm hit Maple Drive with a ferocity that matched the rebellious spirit of the neighbors. As the storm raged, the cacophony of metal chimes, shells, and cowbells exploded into a chaotic symphony. The once joyful sounds transformed into a wild clanging that echoed through the cul-de-sac, drowning out even the loudest thunderclaps. Each gust of wind sent the chimes into a frenzy, creating a discordant melody that reverberated off the houses and rattled windows. Inside her home, Karen sat wide awake, her heart pounding in rhythm with the clanging outside. She had tried to ignore it at first, but as the noise intensified, so did her frustration. What had once been her peaceful sanctuary was now filled with an intrusive din that left her unable to concentrate or sleep. With every loud clang of a cowbell or jarring clash of metal chimes, Karen's irritation grew until it finally reached its breaking point. At 3 a.m., unable to endure any longer, she picked up her phone and dialed the police. "There's too much noise. You have to do something about these chimes," she pleaded when they answered. The officer on the other end calmly informed her that no law was being broken, noise from wind chimes was not against any ordinance. As she hung up in defeat, she could hear laughter mixed with the sounds of wind and rain outside. Her neighbors were reveling in their noisy rebellion while she stewed in frustration. Little did they all realize that this storm would not only test their resolve but would also bring about unexpected consequences that none could foresee. As the cacophony of clanging chimes pierced the darkness, Karen felt her patience wither away. Each loud strike of metal resonated through her walls, causing vibrations that rattled her very bones. She had tried to drown out the noise with pillows over her ears, but the relentless sound seeped through, mocking her attempts to find peace. How can they enjoy this madness, she thought bitterly, frustration boiling inside her. The clock ticked ominously toward 3 a.m., and with every minute that passed, her annoyance turned into desperation. Just moments ago, she had glanced out the window to see her neighbors laughing and reveling in their uproarious celebration. This only fueled her anger. They were clearly enjoying their victory over her while disregarding the chaos they had unleashed. She felt as if she were trapped in a nightmarish concert that she never wanted to attend. Finally, unable to hold back any longer, Karen grabbed her phone and dialed for help. Her hands trembled slightly as she pressed the buttons. She knew she might be overreacting, but this was too much. When a calm voice answered on the other end, she blurted out, "You have to send someone. There's too much noise from these wind chimes." The officer's response was patient yet firm, "Ma'am, I'm afraid there's no law against noise from wind chimes." Her heart sank at those words as the laughter outside continued unabated. Hanging up in frustration, Karen felt isolated in a world where chaos reigned and harmony seemed lost. As she sat in silence amid the storm's fury outside, she wondered if she'd ever regain control of her beloved cul-de-sac. As the relentless storm continued to rage outside, Karen sat in her dimly lit living room, anxiously awaiting the arrival of the police. Every minute felt like an eternity as she replayed her frustrations in her mind. Would they finally put an end to this noise? She imagined how satisfying it would be to see her neighbors silenced, their triumphant laughter replaced by the quiet she desperately sought. Finally, the sound of sirens pierced through the clamor of clanging chimes and howling wind. Karen rushed to the door, opening it wide to reveal two officers stepping out of their vehicle, rain-soaked but unyielding. They greeted her with polite smiles, but she could sense an underlying skepticism as they assessed the chaotic scene unfolding around them. "Thank you for coming," she exclaimed, her voice trembling slightly. "It's unbearable. The wind chimes are making it impossible for anyone to sleep." The officers nodded and assured her they would investigate. They stepped outside into the storm, where the wild sounds of jingling and clanging grew louder around them. After a few moments of observing the raucous celebration taking place across the cul-de-sac, one officer returned to Karen with an apologetic expression. "Ma'am, we appreciate your concerns," he began kindly, "but there's no law against noise from wind chimes. As long as it doesn't violate any local noise ordinances or disturb peace at specific times, we can't take any action." At those words, Karen felt a wave of defeat wash over her. The laughter from her neighbors echoed in stark contrast to her frustration. She stood there in disbelief as they celebrated their freedom amid the storm, realizing that once again, she was powerless against their joyful rebellion. As the officers left, Karen closed the door slowly, feeling more isolated than ever in a world that seemed determined to drown her out. Sitting alone in the dim light of her living room, Karen's mind raced as she processed the events of the night. The storm outside had transformed from a backdrop to a metaphor for her life, chaotic and uncontrollable. She could still hear the raucous celebration of her neighbors, their laughter ringing in stark contrast to her somber reflection. What had she truly accomplished with her complaints about the bamboo wind chimes? In that moment of clarity, Karen began to see the irony in her situation. Her initial desire for peace and harmony had driven her to act against her neighbors, causing a ripple effect that led to complete discord. Instead of silencing them, she had ignited a rebellion that turned their quiet street into a raucous carnival of sound. The very noise she found unbearable was now amplified by the consequences of her own actions. She recalled how she had once prided herself on being a good neighbor and community member, but now she felt isolated and disgraced. The realization struck her hard. In seeking to control what she perceived as dark energy, she had inadvertently invited chaos into the cul-de-sac. It was as if karma had circled back around to teach her a lesson about community and understanding. As thunder rattled the windows, Karen understood that sometimes, our desires to change others only lead to our own undoing. Perhaps it was time for some self-reflection and a willingness to embrace differences rather than condemn them. Perhaps there was still hope for reconciliation if only she could muster the courage to reach out and seek common ground amidst the tumultuous sounds surrounding her home. The following morning brought a calmness to Maple Drive after the storm had passed, leaving behind serenity and a fresh sense of possibility. As the neighbors began to emerge from their homes, they found themselves in an oddly beautiful landscape, with chimes still swaying gently under the early sunlight. Each sound was tinged with a new appreciation, echoing through the stillness like cheerful laughter. Gathering together on the community lawn, the neighbors decided it was time for a conversation. They could sense that Karen's frustration stemmed from a genuine place, so they wanted to extend an olive branch. With cups of warm coffee in hand, they invited Karen out to join them. At first hesitant, Karen stepped out of her house and approached them cautiously. Her heart warmed at the sight of smiling faces and fragrant breakfast treats spread across the lawn. "We thought we'd bring everyone together to talk," one neighbor said brightly. "How about we keep our chimes but find a way to balance the sounds?" The idea sparked enthusiasm among everyone. They brainstormed ways to create designated quiet hours while also embracing their right to express themselves joyously. The neighbors even joked about hosting fun, chime competitions, where everyone could showcase their unique sounds without overwhelming one another. Karen felt a rush of gratitude as she saw her neighbors genuinely trying to include her. She admitted that perhaps she had overreacted, realizing that understanding each other's perspectives was key. Cheers of agreement mixed with chimes filled the air as they began planning their first neighborhood gathering, now as a true community united, not just by noise but by laughter, understanding, and respect. In that moment, Karen knew she had found not just resolution but hope for future harmony in Maple Drive.